Hello, my name is Andrew Patrick. I'm the Director of Political Communications at the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. We have Josh Horwitz, our Executive Director, here today to really talk about what's going on in Michigan with this quite radical plot dangerous to of 13 people charged to kidnap and harm and possibly kill the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, because they don't like her stance on the pandemic and the closings and her stance on guns. And she's been a target of President Trump for quite some time, even as early as yesterday morning before these charges were announced. So, Josh, you and me and us at CSGV have been warning, like with our hair on fire pretty much in op-eds and other ways about this threat of armed insurrectionists, domestic terrorism, and the way it intertwines with the gun lobby and conservative politicians, how they kind of court it a little bit. We've seen that go completely off the charts with Trump hinting and saying stand by. But how did the history of this insurrectionist movement grow and how it has been embraced and culminating in what we're seeing with this almost like terror plot to kidnap Gretchen Whitmer?
Yeah. So look, I've been talking about this for a while. I wrote a book in 2009, Guns, Democracy, and the Insurrectionist Idea. And I kind of warned the nation, if you will, that what we were seeing was the idea that guns were becoming part of the political process, that an individualized view of the Second Amendment that said, I, as an individual, have the right to fight government tyranny. That was the Second Amendment remedies that people talked about. And this is really ginned up by the gun lobby. Their slogan is vote freedom first. And what they meant by that is the freedom to kill and use guns to influence policy. We've been warning about this for a while, talking about documenting how the militia movement has been growing and how they've been threatening political violence, how they've been trying to influence policy. This winter, we saw, the militia movement try to shut down the Virginia legislature. We've seen the Michigan legislature literally overrun by the militia. Same thing in the Idaho legislature. And really what this is about, Andrew, is about if I don't get my way, I'm going to use firearms to change policy. And what that ultimately means is that you might end up thinking about if you're going to use a firearm, you're going to fire a firearm, you're going to kill elected officials. It's a terrible ideology. It's the most anti-democratic, anti-American thing I've ever heard. We settle things by the ballot, not the bullet, as Abraham Lincoln so famously said. Thinking about, like going back to Timothy McVeigh, that's the idea that animated Timothy McVeigh. And so we shouldn't be surprised that after
and he was in Michigan, him and the Nichols brothers,
a tie
in the Michigan militia.
Absolutely, McVeigh was part of the Michigan militia. Michigan has always been a hotbed of militia activity. And you have, what's Trump? He's rocket fuel for this movement. He's literally telling people what to do and telling, in Virginia where I live, telling the governor, telling people that he's there to fight the governor because the governor's taking your gun rights away. So of course, mixed with the whole white supremacist ideology that's so infused with the militia movement. So it shouldn't be surprising that people are taking Trump seriously, that they're taking this idea seriously. And as you recall, the Capitol was stormed and taken over earlier this year because they wanted to oppose the mask mandate, right? And it's kind of amazing that a pretty non-controversial public health tool now becomes the subject of a murder plot and government takeovers, et cetera. But this is what this is about. This militia is claiming that Whitmer's policy about limiting having social distance, limiting business activity, and masks are somehow a plot to destroy our freedom, when in fact the plot is her attempt to save our lives. But this is the problem with the Second Amendment remedies ideology, which is, if there's an individual right take on tyranny, one person's tyranny is another person's healthcare. One person's tyranny is another person's perfectly normal public health requirement to wear a mask. And so what we're seeing now is literally the weaponization of politics, guns have a role in the political process, and our president who refuses to condemn that. And I think we're just lucky in many ways, or thanks to some good police work, that Gretchen Whitmer is still alive. I mean, This wasn't made up. This was serious. People were stalking her house. So it's a very serious problem. And I've been warning people, hey, there's a lot of rhetoric about this, but it's real. The threat's real. And we saw that
Not on
yesterday.
Twitter anymore when they're stalking her vacation home. They
Right.
know her movements. They're talking about this. They're talking about planning a bomb. It is a completely different scenario that we've seen. Like, this is the biggest scale that I've seen since working in this, as far as an insurrectionist plot to kill a government official. But these people met up at these pro-gun rallies at the Capitol. They, you were in Richmond on Martin Luther King Day. You saw how militias and 3%er groups and white supremacist groups all came together in Richmond. And that's how these kind of plots form.
It is. I mean, you know, they often get connected on Facebook or other sort of chat rooms, but they've gone well beyond that now, right? This is now into the action phase. And for anybody who was in Richmond last Martin Luther King Day, you'll never forget that day. I mean, just walking through the streets, not just one, not just five, but thousands of people with semi-automatic assault weapons, with tactical vests, all sorts of the trappings of being in the military, but they're not, right? That not even, you know, who knows how these people are trained. That's part of the problem. But this has moved from, you know, oh, some kid in their parents' basement. This has become now a very tactical, real threat of violence, and therefore a threat to our democracy. And I know, you know, there's sort of a prevailing idea. Well, look, you know, yeah, but these people would be taking on, you know, the state police, the National Guard, and the U.S. military. I want to remind people what one man did with a bunch of rifles. One man in Las Vegas killed 59 people last year, 2 years ago?
3 years ago, October 1st.
Right. So one man with a couple of assault weapons kills 59 people. So and these are the same weapons that they're carrying around the streets of Richmond, that they're storming the Michigan Capitol with. You know, this is a real threat. This is not something that is like, this is not something that we should just, you know, wish will go away. This is dangerous. And I do think, though, Andrew, it's important that we talk about the remedies for this, right? What are we going to do? Number one is, let's not normalize the insurrectionist Second Amendment, right? Let's not let people say casually, oh, those, you know, Second Amendment remedies, or, you know, the guys with the guns make the rules. Let's challenge this. This is democracy. Let's challenge.
The threat of violence, Josh, the threat of violence has always been kind of accepted in the debate on guns. They're like, well, you can't pass this law because then the people with guns will just get violent.
Exactly.
That's been treated as normal. That's what Meghan McCain's saying on The View. Yeah, so it's like a weird view where other things, like after Gabby Giffords was shot, you saw a big bipartisan movement. Everyone was kind of like mourning this horrific tragedy that happened. And now there's a threat to kidnap the governor of Michigan, and it's broken into partisan sides, and Trump's still attacking her. Yeah, and I mean, it's completely irresponsible.
Right. I mean, you know, I remember when George Bush became president, I was like, oh my gosh, you know, the other side's taking over. That's not true. I mean, Bush didn't agree with me on policy, but he agreed on the basic fundamentals of democracy, right? So we're on the same side in the big picture. What's happened now is the polarization of what is democracy mean, and the idea that violence has a role in our political process, and that the president of the United States wouldn't say this is a terrible thing that's happened to our governor in Michigan is really just a tragedy for a democracy. But I want to go back to the point, Andrew, of what we can do about it. We need to condemn it, but we also need, this is the thing, guns are being used now to intimidate people. We've seen this in protests. We've seen this at people with guns trying to prevent people from using their First Amendment rights to protest peacefully. We're using that scene now with government takeovers and Capitol takeovers, and now to threaten the governor. It's clear that the open carry of guns is threatening our political process. We need to stop the open carry of guns. We need to stop guns, any potential for guns at polling places. We need to limit things like concealed carry. We also need to deal with assault weapons and high capacity magazines. And we need to make sure that if you have a firearm, you have processes like licensing. So make sure that people, you can now carry a gun in Michigan, right? Or in North Carolina or wherever, carry a gun on the street without passing a background check. That's ridiculous, right? So we've got to stop all that, and we have to take this very seriously. We're lucky that the FBI was there to stop this, but there's a lot. I'm sure there's a lot of other plots going on, and we can't rely on that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's state and federal, like you said, the majority of the intimidation is with the gun in their hand. Like that is why they're out there marching and are not afraid of anyone. I that's kind of like the stand and fight mantra that's been pushed by the gun lobby for years. But like Ulysses S. Grant in 1871 passed the KKK Act. The country was divided. 6 years after the Civil War, he saw a domestic threat in our nation and took some action at the federal level to dissolve it. And the KKK made a resurgence in the mid 20th century, but it was an action that was praised by historians now as extremely important. Do you think there's any like Boogaloo, Proud Boys type federal action that can be taken to kind of break up these types of cells that we're seeing come out of these groups?
Well, I think we have to, we have to be careful about these things because we do have a First Amendment. But when these advance from speech to real threats, to real credible threats of violence, we do need to do something about it. So I'm not for breaking up clubs of socially minded people. Here I am, though, saying we should use the powers. In every state has an act that says, the militia powers are in the state. You can't have private militias. We need to enforce those things. But what the government really can do, the federal government can do, is take the means of lethality, right? The means of intimidation, make it impossible to carry an open firearm at a political protest and intimidate somebody, right? And that is within our power. And I think it's time. The militia movement has proven right now that open carry of firearms is nothing more than a way to intimidate political opponents, which means we can't have that. So I am for banning open carry. I'm for getting rid of, or really, treating assault weapons like we do machine guns and making sure that they're registered. And it's time to take action now before it's too late.
I think you're absolutely right, Josh. Well, thanks for hopping on a Friday afternoon. Scary moment in a world where we're conditioned to kind of getting wild news every hour. This, I think, knocked a lot of people back. So
unbelievable.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah. Bye.